Welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming to my session today. I really appreciate your time you've invested here in TechEd and as well as coming to my session. This is my last session of the day, but hopefully you'll go to the next two more that are out there, especially like the next one. I think Cleefy's going to talk about remote effects. That should be pretty cool. My name is Kenan Owens. I'm a technical product manager on the data center, system center management team, focusing on virtualization. Today I'm going to talk to you about performance and resource optimization for a virtual machine manager leveraging Hyper-V. Now, we didn't have any other virtual machine manager session, so Stu asked me if I could talk a little bit about VMM SP1 and VMM vNext. So I'm going to take the last 15-20 minutes of this session and give you a little preview of what's coming out with VMM as well. But during this session today, we're going to talk about what is performance resource optimization, why would you want to use it, how it works, how you install it, what types of things you can do with it, what our partners are doing with it, to give you an idea of how you can leverage this within your virtualization environment, whether it be a Microsoft Hyper-V environment or a VMware ESX type environment. So before I get started, who here is running virtualization in your data center? Keep your hands up if you're using VMware. Keep your hands up, or put your hands up if you're using Hyper-V. Who's using VMM to manage these, whether it be VMware or Hyper-V environments? Excellent. So we got about half the room that's doing that. And for a Hyper-V type of environment, I truly recommend using VMM for managing it unless you only have one Hyper-V server. Because when you start managing multiple servers, you really need the benefits that VMM gives you. Now, VMM enables a lot of things, but one capability it enables is this thing called performance and resource optimization. So you have virtualization, and virtualization is a great technology. I mean, isn't it great? It allows me to take a physical server where maybe it took 4 hours to build it before, and now I can drop it down to 20 minutes just using virtualization. If I can build templates and already have things pre-configured, I can drop it down to even 10 minutes using things like VMM to do that deployment of the virtual machines. This savings drives down the cost for managing your virtualized environment. So virtualization is great, isn't it? Except for the fact that with virtualization means that now I have lots more machines running. I haven't talked to a customer that said they have less OS instances now that they've virtualized than they had before they virtualized. And because they have these more instances, they need to manage where they're deployed within their environment, because if I have all of these virtual machines running on the same box at the same time and they're all really active, everybody's performance is going to suffer, and I need to protect against that. And that's where tools like performance and resource optimization come into play. As an administrator, I need to make sure that I get the right knowledge at the right time to make the correct decision on how to run this environment more effectively, how to make sure I get the most out of this hardware investment I've made. If you're watching Ben Armstrong's session earlier today, he talked about 4 VMs per core basically, or 4 virtual CPUs per core. Well, I don't want to have all of them loaded up on one box. I'd like to spread it out across my systems if I can. So I want to know the CPU information of the system. I need to know what kind of storage the VM's running on, and if it's optimally configured, the hardware, the networking, security, take all this information that I can get from all these different sources, which traditionally are managed by different groups, but maybe I have to know all of this stuff and be able to make intelligent decisions as to where to place these VMs, what to do in case an issue occurs, and how to handle it. And that's where Pro comes into play. So what is Pro? What exactly can it do for me? So Pro is a technology built off of and extending things like Operations Manager management packs. So here is using Operations Manager today in conjunction with their environment. So Pro needs to have both Operations Manager and Virtual Machine Manager installed in your environment, and they need to be communicating together. And we'll show you how to do it. And if you're using Operations Manager today, you can simply hook them together. If you're not using Operations Manager today, you can simply install Operations Manager and leverage it for your virtualization environment. You don't need to leverage it for everything else initially, and then over time, if you want, you can expand out and use it for the other things. But Operations Manager is our tool that monitors the health and well-being of an environment, and Virtual Machine Manager is a tool that manages the virtualization layer. So if you look at technology in VMware, who here is using DRS? technology? A few of you. So DRS, they call it distributed resource scheduling. It rebalances the workload as the utilization on those systems change, and vMotions machines from one box to another. Well, DRS basically uses vCenter, which looks at the health of the virtualized environment, and then it tells ESX, hey, you got to move these things around, and ESX decides where it's going to put those virtual machines. When you're looking at a Microsoft solution that's leveraging both of those two capabilities, plus a lot more things that we can do, it would be using both Operations Manager for the health monitoring and VMM for the virtual machine management. So Operations Manager is monitoring the health of these systems through these things called management packs. Management packs created by Microsoft, or they can be created by other companies, partner companies. And then they're extended via Pro to be able to be used for virtualization. So Operations Manager is monitoring the system, sees, hey, it's alerting that the CPU of this system on the left is going high. And what will happen then, a pro tip will kick off. Operations Manager will tell VMM, hey, you got to fix this system over here. We think that you should move this VM because it's running at a high utilization. VMM then uses what we call intelligent placement to automatically migrate that VM to another system to rebalance that workload. So in this case, what we're doing with a straight-out-of-the-box management pack from Microsoft is basically what DRS is doing on the VMware side, if you're familiar with that. We're rebalancing the workload across the farm as utilization changes. One of the awesome things about Pro is that not only can it move virtual machines around, but because it's a management pack, and the management pack simply has not applications, it simply has basically a script that you write to give it a recovery action. It could do much, much more than just move VMs around. And you, as an organization, can create your own custom management packs. So who here has custom applications running in their environments that are running in virtual machines? Pretty much everybody has one thing or another that may not have a partner management pack. Well, you could create your own management pack that monitors that system. And for an example, at Microsoft, we have this tool called HR Web. It's a benefits tool where every 6 months we got to update our performance reporting, and then once a year we got to do our benefits elections. So 2 or 3 times a year, this site gets very, very busy and needs a lot of resources. But for most of the year, it's just sitting there doing nothing because, I may need to check my prescriptions once a month or something, but I'm not going to really be hitting it very hard. So what performance resource optimization could do, we could create our own custom management pack that's monitoring that system. And when the resource delays, the latency between me accessing that website go up high, maybe 800 milliseconds, we start migrating virtual machines around. Those web's front ends, we migrate them around. And that might alleviate the problem. But what if the problem is the application just can't handle more users? The application can only handle 1,000 users, and I'm hitting it with 10,000 people. Well, instead of moving things around, because that's just going to move the problem around, I should create more VMs, load balance it within the web pool, and gain benefits of spreading out that workload. So Pro could do things like on a green to yellow condition, moving from working great to warning, let's move the VM around and see if that fixes it. If that fixes it, great, we're good. If it doesn't fix it and it goes from yellow to red, Pro has the ability to then take that VM, if I wanted to, and create another one. Take a template of the VM and redeploy it, add it to a load balance web form, and now I've extended my workload. So Pro is much, much more than just migrating VMs around. It can do whatever you or your partner-created MPs do for correcting whatever that situation is. In fact, on the partner side, I'll tell about some partners that with the management packs, they aren't even doing anything to the VMs. They're actually changing the infrastructure that it's running on. So we'll go into that. So in the essence, Pro is Operations Manager monitors an environment through this management pack, sees that a problem occurs, and then takes a corrective action, usually talking to VMM, and VMM does something with that virtual machine, or with a virtual machine, or a physical system. How it works under the covers is that System Center Operations Manager has these things called management packs. And for every application that we create, we have to create a management pack for Operations Manager. It's part of our core engineering criteria. So we have a VMM management pack. And we've also created these things called Pro packs that run on top of that. And we've created this other thing called a Pro library. And that Pro library is what our partners use to create their own, or you would use to create your own custom management packs. So the Virtual Machine Manager Health and Monitoring Management Pack will monitor the Virtual Machine Manager system. So when I connect this Operations Manager to VMM and I set up the connection between them, I get this management pack and I can monitor the health of my VMM environment through Operations Manager. But I also get the Performance Pack, which will monitor the performance of my VMs and the hosts on there and will migrate things around or tell me that it wants to migrate things around as those alerts kick off. And we'll get one for both VMware as well as Hyper-V, as well as a VM right-sizing pack, making sure those VMs, like if they're consistently using over 90% of the RAM on that, assigned to that VM, it'll tell you. So you can shut the VM down, give it more RAM if it's utilizing all the resources that you've given it. And then if I'm a partner and I want to create my own management pack, I would do that by leveraging the Pro Library MP, which is basically the library class that I would connect to then write my own custom management packs. So how this looks like from a host level is that no matter what kind of host I'm running, whether it be a Hyper-V host or a VMware host, or I'm using these virtual machines, I can leverage the Microsoft-created management packs for monitoring the health of them. If I'm a partner, I can monitor things like elements of that physical machine. I can monitor, like from HP or Dell or IBM, I'm monitoring the physical system, and if that alerts, I can do something. If I'm Emulex or QLogic, I'm monitoring that HBA that's connected in that system to see if it has too many IOPS going through it. So we have a lot of partner-created management packs we'll talk a little bit about. They use the library. And then a management pack, the simplest form of a management pack just alerts. It sends an alert out saying something's wrong. So it's monitoring the system and an alert happens. But when you pro-enable that management pack, we do 2 extra tasks besides just alerting. So the alerting will give us the knowledge of what happened. And if there's some knowledge within Operations Manager that says this is how you should fix it, that'll also be presented when this alert kicks off. But with Pro, what we do is we also run the diagnostic and the recovery tasks associated with that management pack. The diagnostic task would allow me to understand who is actually having the problem. In other words, which VM on this system is the one that I need to move. And the recovery task will tell me what I need to do, move it to another system, that type of thing. So put that all together, and that is what a Pro-enabled management pack looks like. And really, the nice thing about Pro is that you can create it a couple of ways. The first way is that you could use Operations Manager and create your own custom management pack, and that's through the web GUI. That's one way to do it. The other thing is you could take an XML file. It's basically just a bunch of XML information which has things like the the name of the Pro management pack, what it's actually responding or recovering, and if I need to fix it, what's the recovery policies? What's the PowerShell scripts that I need to run? And what I need to do, I need to bring up real quick a sample management pack so I can show you what it looks like in real time instead of this really small chart right here. So let me pull this up real quick. All right. Am I there? All right, so I'm using a simple XML editor. This is XML Marker. And this is a custom management pack that our product management team has created. This is a sample management pack that kicks off when a certain event log is triggered inside of Operations Manager. It picks off that event log and then runs the recovery tasks from it. So a couple things to show here that you may find interesting. The first one is, you're going to give it a name and an ID. So this one's name is just a simple Pro management pack for HP. Because it's a partner management pack, you can see that it's using that library class that I was telling you about. So it's based off of that library class. Then what happens is within this management pack, we got to say what we are actually monitoring. And in this example, we are monitoring, and it's down here, we are monitoring a Hyper-V server. So what we've done is we've set up this management pack to monitor the event log of a Hyper-V server. And if something happens on that event log, we take action. So let's go and look at that pretty quickly right here. And we look at monitoring. And let me pull down here. Because we also have the recovery task, so I'll show you that. Here we go. All right. So what happens is that in this environment, if we see inside the event log that we get an event ID of 116, this alert kicks off. So what we've done, we set this alert. Now, some of you are familiar with Operations Manager, others of you aren't. Operations Manager has a bunch of pieces to it, but one of the pieces is the RMS, or the Root Management Server. Another piece is you could have basically a gateway type server, which can take information and then filter it back to the Root Management Server. What we do with Pro Management Packs is that the management pack can be alerted from any of those servers. Any of those servers can monitor a system and get the alert. But then what happens is after that alert happens, it throws an alert to the RMS server, the Root Management Server. Because when you connect the connection between VMM and Operations Manager, you're connecting that connection to the Root Management Server, and that Root Management Server has the ability to take action within that VMM server. So I need to, if I'm an outside at one of these gateway servers, I can't talk directly to VMM because I'm not going to have the authority to run a task in there. So I have to tell RMS that there's a problem, then RMS will run the task against the VMM server. So what happens is that after this action occurs, it actually kicks off another event within the RMS, and the RMS server then goes and runs the task. And let me pull it up here so you can show you what the task is in this environment. So in this example, all we've done is we've said, okay, there's a simple management pack, and this is what we're going to do right here, is that we're going to run this, and as you can see, it's just a PS1 script. So we're going to run this thing called recoveryscript.ps1. So when this happens, we're going to query Operations Manager for some specific counters, like which VM and is on the machine, which machine's having the problem. We're going to then, and all this pro tip does is iterate all the VMs on that server and grabs the first VM that it sees, and then it moves that server to a different box. So it goes in, and it's just using strict PowerShell, using tools like get VM host, so it's getting the VMs on a specific host that you've passed the parameters to, and then it's running a performance action on there. And this action is very simple. It just moves the VM. So it runs a move VM and tells VMM to, hey, find an intelligent placement host and move this virtual machine to the other host. So you could take a skeleton like this, write your own VB script or PS1 script, throw it in there, PowerShell script, throw it in there, and it can do whatever you want. I mean, you could technically have a script that says when it goes from green to yellow, move the VM. When it goes from yellow to red, make me a pot of coffee or something like that. I mean, it's very simple to just throw in whatever PowerShell script you want to put in there and build your own thing. And one thing I want to try and do is build this environment, but when it does this, all it does is kick off an Apollos workflow and then use the automation capabilities within Apollos to run the recovery. So that is kind of what a management pack looks like. And now what we'll do is show you how to set up your environment so that you can leverage these management packs. So when you when an alert happens within Operations Manager, that alert looks like what we call a pro tip. And pro tip is shown in VMM, an alert is shown within Operations Manager. And the text and data within these things correlate really closely together. So if we look at this screen, at the top is a management pack. So up on top is what it would look like within Operations Manager, and down on the bottom is what it would look like within VMM. And if we look here, we see the pro name, so it tells us which pro tip kicked off, and this was pro CPU utilization was the event that occurred. And this says why it happened. So it's saying that the CPU utilization has detected on this machine has gone above the default threshold of 75%. Then it says this is the knowledge, the cause, and how to fix it. Well, you have a VM. The VMs within that system are using too much resources, so move a VM from one host to another. So to free up resources, migrate some VMs off of this host. Now in Pro, it actually adds a which VM should I use? It tells me which one can I use. In this example, it doesn't have a VM that it can move away from the host. So it tells you that there's a problem, but it can't fix it automatically. But if this one had a VM where it said, if I move this host off, I'm going to drop below that threshold, then it would say, okay, move this VM. And then Pro actually has on the bottom, it has the option to either implement or dismiss this tip. So this is what it looks like within VMM. All those same things that we talked about, what it is, what the script is it'll run, what's going on to free it up, move that VM from that box to that box. And then it has on the bottom right over there 2 options for you, implement or dismiss. You're only going to see that if you have this set for manual operations. When you create a pro tip and you have it set up within VMM, you can say, hey, I want this to be automated. In other words, it just happens in the background. As pro tips get kicked off, they automatically implement them. Or you can say have it set to manual. Manual says, tell me there's a pro tip, flip the switch, let me then decide whether I want to take action on it. Manual is something that I'd recommend you start with until you get comfortable with the tips that we're popping off. And then once you get comfortable, switch it to automatic. Because at 2 o'clock in the morning, when some major file server is running and all of a sudden it needs to move to a different box to handle the resources from, say, across the pond, you're not going to want to hope that you saw that this tip occurred and then go in there and make the change. You'll want it to automatically make that change. So you don't have to always keep watching the VMM system to say, hey, is there a pro tip going on here or not? Now, when this thing alerts, when Operations Manager alerts, you can create notification capabilities on there, and it'll notify you via page or whatever you want in that respect. But you have to then go into VMM, open up the pro tip, and then hit implement before something like that will happen. So now we've seen what a pro tip looks like, and I'll show it to you in the demo. But how do I install it within my environment? How do I set up this integration or this connection between Ops Manager and VMM? Well, first I need to, within Ops Manager, after I do the install of the console, I need to then install specific management packs that are basically just base management packs that I'll need. And for most management packs that you're going to install, you probably have most, if not all of these installed already within your Ops Manager system. But if not, and VMM tells you which management packs you need. When you're trying to install the VMM console, it'll say, you don't have these management packs installed, please go out and install them. And to install them within Operations Manager, you simply just open up the console, click on management packs, download from the catalog and pick the ones that you want. So it's fairly quick and easy and dirty to install them. After they're installed, then you install the VMM console, administrator's console, on the Operations Manager root management server. And the one you choose is not the normal VMM admin console, but the Configure Operations Manager. So Configure Operations Manager will install the console, the VMM admin console, as well as the tools necessary to run this connection between the 2 environments. You install that on the root management server. A caveat for any of you who may have Ops Manager and you want to install the VMM server on the same box, if you already have the VMM administrative client installed and then you install Operations Manager and you want to do this Configure Operations Manager, you want to uninstall that admin client first and then use the Configure Operations Manager here to reinstall it back on there because it needs to have some stuff put together. Now, if you don't uninstall it and you just run that Configure Ops Manager, it'll say the admin console is already installed. Can I uninstall it and then install this? And you just say yes, and it'll do it. But you have to uninstall that and install the Configure Operations Manager console. Once I do that, then I'm set up on the Operations Manager side, and it's just now ready and waiting for my VMM server to connect to Operations Manager. So instead of running through a bunch of slides and showing you how to do it, I'm going to just click over to my server and show you what you have to do. Where is it? It disappeared. Okay. So let me just hop into this Operations Manager server. Okay, so in Operations Manager server, this is the Operations Manager console. Now let me pop over to the VMM console. And here's the VMM console. So those of you that have used VMM, you're familiar. It's a familiar interface. It's very similar to the Operations Manager console. Where I start setting these pieces up is after I've done all that initial configuration stuff, I then need to go to my Administration tab within VMM, which is down here in the bottom right, or bottom left of your screen. And I go to the System Center link right here. Now inside of here, I have two options: Operations Manager reporting URL and the Operations Manager server. The reporting URL is used for setting up and gathering reports of your VMM environment. The one we're going to leverage is the Operations Manager server. All right, come on. Okay, so inside of here, you just double click on it, and it's a one entry dialog. You just tell it which Operations Manager server I want to hit, and I'm going to hit CON-OM-001, which is actually the machine that I'm running on, but I have another VMM server that I'm using this client to connect to that VMM server to set up the connection to my Operations Manager server. All right, so I say that, and I connect to the server. You'll know it works when you see this thing right here, this diagram. So what happens is that as I set up this environment, as the management packs are installed, I can now click on diagram, and it'll give me my virtualized diagram environment where it'll have the VMM server, it'll have the Hyper-V hosts that are connected to it. If I drill down on that, it can split that up into the different host groups and the different Hyper-V hosts and the different VMs on them, and I can see the health of them through the Operations Manager view. So that's where I would set up that piece of it. So that has set up the connection between Operations Manager and VMM. Once that's done, now I need to turn on Pro within my VMM environment. And to do that, I go and click on General, and then I go to Pro Settings. And Pro Settings has some interesting capabilities. We'll go through these because these are what you would use, and it uses it at a tree level. So when I set it here, I'm setting it at the very top, the root level, and I'm saying Enable Pro Tips. So allow me to leverage this Pro capability. And I want it to happen not just on critical, but on warning and critical. If I go from green to yellow or green to red or yellow to red, I want a pro tip to kick off. Then here's the option if I want it to automatically implement Pro. So I could have that checked and then have critical only enabled, which means that if it goes from green to warning, from green to yellow, then at that point it kicks off a pro tip, but it doesn't automatically implement it. It allows me to then go in and click on whether or not I want it to be implemented. But if it goes from yellow to red, then I want it to happen like that. I want it to fix itself. And at that point, it will just automatically implement that environment. So I can choose those types of things if I want. Now, what I'm going to do is, because I want to kick off a pro tip, and it takes a few seconds for it to actually happen, I'm going to kick off an activity that will initiate a pro tip, and then we'll go back and go through the other configuration pieces. So in here, I've also connected to this temporary server here, and I have this program that will allow me to stress the CPU of a VM. So I have this VM called ConTempo2, and I'm going to run it at 70% utilization. If we look at Task Manager here, you can see we've kicked up the utilization. Now, if you went to Ben Armstrong's talk earlier today, Task Manager is not a great way to show utilization, but what it shows is that this machine is doing something. So that it is. Of the time it has the processor, it's using 72% of it. So I have this processor running, and I have this activity running on that VM. Let's go back to the Pro environment, which is right here. And let's go look at where else I can do things within Pro. So Pro can be set at the host level. And if I have these host groups and multiple host groups, I can set Pro at individual levels. And they can inherit from above them, their parent folder. So in this one, I have it set to inherit from my settings of the Pro group, and it shows me what it is, enable Pro, warning critical. But let's say that this is a production environment, and I want it to happen automatically, whereas my other environment was dev, and I wanted to tell me, and I would go and fix it. Well, I can change this one and say, I want it to enable, but I want it to automatically, and I want it to happen for anything that occurs. So I can change it for particular host groups within this. So if I have multiple host groups, some are in production, some are not, some are VMware, whatever, I can decide which of those host groups have Pro enabled, and if they have Pro enabled, what their settings are if I don't want them to inherit from their parents. The other thing I can do is I can go in and let's say I have a particular virtual machine that I don't want Pro to happen on. Maybe I have a SQL server and I want it to stay on that host if at all possible, and I want everything else to move in and out around it, but I don't want that one to move. So I could take like this SQL environment here and I can do a properties on that, and under the settings tab there, I can decide if I want to exclude this virtual machine from Pro host level activities. So what I've really said here is that on the things like migrating VMs around, I wanted to do it for all the other systems, but I want this guy to stay here, and I want to be able to manage where it goes and when it moves. And with that, Pro is enabled on this system. And Pro is enabled with all the default Microsoft management packs. And if I installed any of the custom management packs from our partners, they would all be leveraging the Pro environment. So that's how quick and dirty it is to set up a Pro environment within your Microsoft or VMware environment. And you can take Pro and replace things like DRS. You could turn off DRS, turn on Pro, and Pro would then manage your host environment. And then you have the same environment being managed, both your Microsoft and your VMware environment from the same central location. One of the nice things about Pro is that because it's operations management packs, some of them have guest insights. So they're looking at applications inside the guest and taking action there. As you see, the pro tip kicked off. It says that, hey, this server, conserv02, and if we come down here, we can see that host conserv02 had that VM, contemp02, that was running upon it. And it's saying, hey, this pro tip kicked off, which said CPU utilization on this host exceeded the threshold of percent processor time. And it's saying that the virtual machine on this host was the one that was having the problem. And if we look at more information here, we can see that it says to resolve this problem, we're going to move that VM from the host that it's on to a different host. And all I need to do now is click implement. If it was automatic, it would have actually done it. It wouldn't have even given me this choice. It would have just done it. And at that point, it's going to kick off the migration of that VM. So let me scroll this down to here, and we'll see that this VM will start moving when intelligent placement kicks off and live migration starts. So that right there is pro tips. Now, I'm going to talk about some of the other partner pro tips that we have while this thing's going to kick off. And at that point, we'll go into the next step, and I'll show you things like SP1 and VMM Next. So some of our partner pro tips that we have partner pro tips from our hardware vendors, and they, like IBM, HP, Dell, have created pro tips that monitor the physical system. And if that physical system is going to go down, alerts on some type of error, temperature too high, fan, whatever, it will take that system and basically put it in maintenance mode. And when it puts it in maintenance mode, all the VMs will be migrated off to other systems within that cluster. So Pro is great if you have a cluster, because by having a cluster, then I have the ability to move VMs around. If I have a bunch of different individual Hyper-V hosts, Pro doesn't give me as much of an advantage. Secondly, we have pro tips from partners like our storage vendors, like NetApp. NetApp's created a pro management pack that will look at things like whether you have dedupe turned on. If you don't have dedupe turned on your virtual machine LUNs, it'll say, hey, you don't have dedupe turned on. You want me to enable it for you. When you hit implement, it'll turn on dedupe for you for that system. Or it'll look at the size of the volume, and as you start using VMs, and maybe you're using dynamically expanding disks, and they start growing to where that volume is running out of space, when it gets up to 95% space, then it will it will run and take, so when it gets to 95 space, it will just, when the pro tip kicks off, it'll expand that LUN on the fly to give you now 85% use instead of 95% use. So it'll free up more space. That's a great tool if you're using, say, a VDI environment. And you have a bunch of VMs that are using dynamically expanding disks or one base disk with a bunch of different disks attached to it. They might grow, each of these VMs might grow at different points in time as it's adding data. And this will just dynamically expand that VM at that point that it runs up to 95%. We have pro tips from other partners. And as you can see, live migration is occurring. The reason it's going slow is because I'm only on a 100 megabit network, because I brought a gigabit network but only had 110 power and I didn't have a converter. So I had to borrow a 100 megabit network. So live migration works. It's just really slow on this system. So instead of just having you guys sit through all that, I'll leave it on there. I won't drop it down, but what I'll do is I'll go back to the slide presentation so we can see the rest of the slide here. So the out-of-box solutions from Microsoft are the host performance, guest performance, host performance for both Microsoft Hyper-V systems and ESX environments, guest VM right sizing, as well as the extensible framework that you or a partner can create their management packs. We have a big partner ecosystem. We talked about servers, I already talked about storage, I gave you an example of. Load balancers. That example where I said, well, you can create a management pack that will expand, create more VMs. Well, F5 and Citrix have already created something similar to that, where you can have an environment, and as the load increases, it can spin up pre-created VMs and add it to a load-balanced web pool. So now you have that advantage. Capacity planning, you can monitor your systems and determine whether you need more or less resources as the pro kicks off. Non-Microsoft workloads, so partners like Quest have created workloads that manage and monitor non-Microsoft environments. Power and cooling, APC has created a management pack that looks at whether you're fully leveraging the systems that you have powered on. Because if I have a big system that's taking a lot of power and I only have 1 or 2 VMs running on it, I'm not getting the most out of it, I'm wasting power, so why not collapse those down or something like that. Virtual I/O for storage adapters and security, so configuration and compliance, Tripwire's created one there. So we have a lot of partners. But we don't let every partner create their own management pack that we distribute via our catalog. We had one partner that said, hey, I want to create a management pack. When someone tries to do this thing, if it doesn't work, I wanted to kick off an alert that says, hey, we don't have it now, but it's coming in the next release or something like that. I mean, that's not helpful for you guys. So what we've done is we made sure that, one, we've created management packs that don't really overlap with each other, and two, the resources that our customers and partners have asked us for are the ones that we're pushing to get first. So that's what a pro-enabled management pack system in the pro-enabled environment looks like. We've talked about it. I can't show you the Partner Pro demo just because of the fact that I can't get my network access to work, back to corporate to work. So what I'm actually going to show you today is talk about some of the new stuff that's coming in with the Pro environment. And what we're going to talk about is both Service Pack 1. So who here went to this Hyper-V Service Pack 1 talk earlier this week? Well, we have to update VMM to handle Windows Server 2008 R2 Service Pack 1 because of the new features it enables. If dynamic memory was turned on and the release version of VMM hits it, it doesn't really understand what's going on. And we also want to make sure that we can wrap up and roll in some of the QFEs that we've already created together. So a couple things about 2008 Service Pack 1, 2008 R2 Service Pack 1, if you aren't familiar with it. It adds 2 new capabilities specifically for virtualization. Dynamic memory, which is the ability to hot add memory on the fly and pull memory away from a VM when it's not using it, as well as remote effects, which gives us the power of virtualized graphic resources and some other things for passing that data down to a virtualized environment for more robust desktop environments experiences. So we needed to add support for that. And right now, Windows Server 2008 R2 Service Pack 1 is in beta. When it goes into RC, we'll release an RC of VMM 2008 R2 Service Pack 1. And then when it releases, we'll release within 30 days the update. Now, hopefully it'll be a lot less than 30 days, but we want to make sure we run through a whole test pass before we release it with their release code. So system requirements for dynamic memory. The host operating system, the Hyper-V parent, has to be Windows Server 2008 R2 Service Pack 1 or Microsoft Hyper-V Server 2008 R2 Service Pack 1. The guests can be any of these guests, 2003, 2008, 2008 R2, a couple of guest operating systems, client operating systems, and all of the ones, these are the ones that are going to be supported at release. R2 Service Pack 1 with VMM, what's new in it? We're going to support dynamic memory, remote FX. We're also going to support the guest operating systems, so you can install your Windows 7 Service Pack 1. And we're going to roll up all of our QFEs, which are our quick fix engineerings, that were created within VMM 2008 R2 already. One piece of note, I don't know if I have it in the slide deck, when you upgrade from 2008, if you wanted to go from 2008 or 2008 R2 all the way up to vNext, VMM vNext, our next release, which is coming out next year, you'll need to upgrade to Service Pack 1 first, and then use Service Pack 1 as the jumping point to vNext. So we've added some new settings within VMM. We've added a startup memory value, a max memory value, similar to what was in the 2008 R2 SP1 Hyper-V, so you can see the same things there. Memory buffer, all those things that Ben showed, we enable here, as well as a priority for the memory, and I'll show you where those are. We've also added an additional VM property that you can look at to see how much of this RAM is actually being used by the VM, the current memory in use. And then we've added upgrades to the integration components, so you can upgrade the integration components for the VMs to the R2 Service Pack 1 system. For remote effects, we've added new settings as far as the type of virtualized adapter that you're passing to the VM. So you default to a standard video adapter. It gives you one screen, but you can bump it up to the remote FX 3D adapter if the host has the capability to support that. Maximum number of monitors, depending on what your resolution is that you want and how many monitors you have, this gives you a kind of a grid as to if I want every screen to be 1024 768, I can have up to 4 monitors. If I want it to be 1600 by 1200, I can have 3. You know, just how big that video buffer is that I pass out to the user. And then we've added additional VM properties. One of these properties is only enabled and shown through the PowerShell script, and that's the GPU ID. Now, I think the next session is remote FX in depth, so ask Michael Cleef what that means. And that's if I want to live migrate from one system to another, I got to have the same GPUs on both of those systems. Our library is also set up to support it for the integration services and everything. I can update the integration services for stop VMs. I can also in the library deploy VMs, and when I deploy a VM, if the VM was created with SP1, I can deploy it to a system. If the system has SP1, then I can give it dynamic memory. If it doesn't, then I would give it just the standard static memory assigned to it. Install for VM creation, the integration components. When we do activities, if we do activities from a host that has SP1 installed on it, and that VM has dynamic memory turned on, in the cluster, and maybe in the cluster I have multiple hosts that some have it and some don't have dynamic memory turned on, we will allow you to migrate that VM to ones with dynamic memory, and ones without, we'll tell you you can't do it, and we'll even tell you why. So if I have a VM that maybe at one point in time in all the checkpoints that I made, I had turned on dynamic memory, but then later on I turned it off, because I have that point where I may go back and it may have dynamic memory installed, I will only be able to migrate that VM to a Service Pack 1 system. So if I wanted to get rid of that, I'd have to get rid of that limitation. I'd have to get rid of that checkpoint that had dynamic memory turned on so that I could then move it to either of those systems. So we do placement checks. The other thing we want to do is if you want to install the updated virtual guest services, take a stop VM, right-click on it, and click on Install Virtual Guest Services. If I want to migrate it, I simply pick Migrate. And at this point, it says, I can't move this VM to this other system because, like I said, that checkpoint, one of the checkpoints is configured to use dynamic memory. So even if I had turned off dynamic memory for the existing checkpoint because I'd stopped the VM, turned it off, because one of my checkpoints had dynamic memory turned on, I can't move this to a system that doesn't have SP1 installed. And that's just simply what this is talking about here. Another one is if I was trying to move this machine to a system that had remote effects, and the system wasn't remote effects capable. I don't have a second level address translation or a SLAT processor, or any of those other things. The host role isn't turned on, those types of things. It'll tell me why it can't get it, whether it's the host role wasn't turned on, the second level address translation, or the GPU wasn't correct, and it'll tell me those things. We've also made updates to Pro, because Pro, when it decides with intelligent placement where it wants to put that VM, it may try and put it on the system, and that system, if it doesn't have enough memory right now Pro looks at the max amount of memory. Well, the VM with dynamic memory may be down to like 500 meg instead of running at 4 gig. So all I need is 500 meg of that other system. So now Pro takes that into account and uses the amount of memory that's within the VM that it's using, and not the amount of RAM that's assigned to that machine. So we consider the current memory utilization when we do things like move the VM around. All right. So when I want to upgrade from existing 2008 R2 and I want to upgrade to Service Pack 1, it's basically a 4-step process. First step, I need to back up the VMM database. And the only reason I need to do that is that we changed the database, so you can't go back. So you want to back it up, so if you need to move back to the original version, you can do that. Then you just launch, set up, and follow the upgrade wizard. You'll just go through the steps. Then you want to repeat it on each of the boxes that are running VMM clients or the VMM console. And then the last thing is that I want to remove the existing Pro management packs and then import the new management packs into Operations Manager for Pro capabilities. Now, one of the nice things is that the R2 agents that I have are the same that are supported in Service Pack 1, so I don't need to go to each Hyper-V host and upgrade it to the latest and greatest agents. They're already going to be able to run with the existing agents that they have on both them and the library servers. All right, so let's show real quickly Service Pack 1 within your environment. Fortunately for me, I'm running this whole system, all my Hyper-V cluster. The host that's housing my storage is R2, but all my Hyper-V cluster are all running Service Pack 1. So real quick, temp 002, moved to server 1, and now I have no more pro tips within this environment, so everything worked out there. But let's take one of these VMs, and I'll take this Windows 2003 VM right here. And if I look at the properties on it, what I can see is that this is a Windows 2003 Enterprise Edition VM. But if I look under hardware configuration and look under memory, I can set it for dynamic memory. And what it says is start up at 512 megs. So when you power this VM on, have it start up at 512. Never use more than 2048. Never go past 2 gigs of RAM. So I can set an upper threshold. And then how much memory buffer. That was how much do I want to leave free so that it can either grow quickly or I can use it for file cache operations. I've dropped that down to 5%. I'm really trying to shrink this down very tightly. So that's where I set that value. If I want to switch it back to static, I can just click static and it defaults to whatever your startup value is, but you can change it to whatever you want. The other thing we wanted to do was a priority piece, and that was where you would set that in the same place you set the CPU priority. So now you have CPU priority here, high, low, normal, medium, custom, and you can now have the memory priority, high, normal, low, in custom. So you can set that. And where memory priority works is that when I assign memory priority, the higher the priority, the faster it gets access to the memory when it needs it. If I wanted to add the virtual adapter stuff to here for what is it called? For remote effects, I'll go to a different VM and I'll show you that. So let's go to contemp here and look under properties of that. Under hardware config, where is it? It's usually like right over here somewhere. All right, so let me go to a shutdown VM and see if I can find it there. And then if I can't find it. But it's in the settings capability. So if I go to properties here, and I pop up and I go to hardware configuration. Oh, I know what I have to do. Oh, well. I guess because, it's supposed to be in that piece, but it's not. So let me just do this, and I'll just create a new virtual machine. So I'll show you kind of what that piece looks like, and I'll say create a brand new virtual machine. And under here, under hardware, under video adapter here, I have two choices. I have standard video adapter and remote FX 3D video adapter. So if I pick that, then I can choose how many monitors I'm going to have connected to this thing and what the size is. And it just gives me the list that's available. Now, a couple of things I want to mention. If I'm creating a new VM, two things I can do in this new VM. I can set whether or not it can use remote effects, and I can also choose whether or not it uses dynamic memory. Both of those are great, but I haven't told it which host to put on yet. Because of the way VMM's designed, it creates the configuration of the VM before it tells you what host you want to put it on. So when I keep going down and I hit next on these steps here, and I want to store this virtual machine on a host, now it's going to tell me you can't put it on this host because there is no remote FX adapter because it doesn't have remote effects installed on the system. It's not a capable system for running it. So if I tried to put this on a 2008 host that didn't have R2 SP1 on it, it would say you need SP1 to be able to enable dynamic memory. So then you have to, if you do get into that scenario, you got to go back, and I got to turn this back to being a standard video adapter, and then next, and now I can pick the host I want to put it on. And right now it's saying that it doesn't want me to put it there because I'm overcommitted, I have too many VMs, but if I wanted to, I could put it on there and then just go through and next and whatever. But I'm going to say no, I'm going to cancel it out. So that's how you would set up SP1, and those are the things that you would see. The next thing that you would also want to look at is, let's look at my domain controller. So this domain controller here, I've set up, and I'll bring this up and I'll show you two pieces here. So I'll show you startup memory, and then I'll right-click and I'll show you maximum memory. And what we have is we have these VMs set up for 1 gig of startup memory and this VM is 512 of startup memory, but only up to 2 gigs of total RAM. But what we do is we look down here and we see that, 512 meg at startup, but we're using 622 currently of megs of RAM. So dynamic memory has allowed this thing to expand up to 622 megs of RAM, but that's all it's needed. It'll never go past 2 gig, and I can see that in there. What we're trying to get, and I've been talking with the SP1 guys, is to get this value placed up here so it'll be easier to see. But right now, they're showing it right down here. But they said since basically this value, this percent value, is a running average over a certain period of time, why not just show this as that running average, even though it's not going to be exactly what it might be running on there. It's going to be close enough that you'll be able to make decisions on it. So that's Service Pack 1. Any questions on that before we move on? Awesome. So let me talk a few seconds about VMM vNext, and then I'll go and show you some of the stuff in there. I think we have time. I got 6 minutes, so just about enough time. All right, so our strategy with VMM vNext is to be that private and public cloud management environment for which an administrator can create an environment locally and then create cloud-type services internally and then be able to federate them up into a cloud-type environment if possible. And so when you move to more of a cloud type of environment where you're more service-oriented, this is where VMM is trying to move into. And we're doing that by doing these capabilities of adding service composition, where you can create a service, not a particular VM, but a group of VMs in a service that can be dynamic in how it expands and handles access to different resources. We also want to create image-based deployment, where I can have less number of base images, deploy them down, and then just characterize the VM by adding a specific application or web information or SQL DAC to that VM. And we're doing that through technologies like application virtualization. So if you're familiar with client application virtualization, we've talked a few years now about this thing called server application virtualization. Well, we're moving into using that to be more of a better fit for easier deployment and easier updates of application environments. And it would look something similar to this. I guess I hit the right one. If I take an application environment, now I can take an application library. I can take these applications and I can encapsulate them and package them up. And if I couple that with VMs created and hosted on a Hyper-V type of system, I can then take these applications as I need to deploy them and just throw them out there on the systems that need them. Now, one of the nice things about application virtualization is if I have an application that I need to update, I can update that application in my environment, and then I can pause and push that application update down to the VMs that are already deployed. And I can do this rapidly. If I want to update the underlying OS, Patch Tuesday comes out or whatever, I can simply pull up that application, throw in the update to that application, to the OS, and then drop that application back down onto it. I have that now separation between the OS and the application layer. So this gives me a lot of operational efficiencies now as an administrator. I can lessen the amount of images that I have to manage, and when I do need to do these updates, I can do them much more quickly. Now, if you're familiar with client application virtualization, it has a lock as to the number of, when you create and encapsulate that application, it's set with a lot of the configuration information. With Server App V, we're adding this capability to deploy and pass into that package configuration information for that VM. As an example, let's say I take a dynamic server and I package it up. Well, when I deploy it to my dev environment, I want it to hit my dev SQL server. And when I deploy it to my production environment, I want it to hit the production SQL server. Well, what I can do is create that one package and then take the configuration information, plop in what server, what credentials, whatever I want to put in there that this app package needs, deploy it down, apply that configuration, and now it accesses the server that it wants to access. And let me show you what that looks like. So let me minimize this one right here and go into this next one here. So I'm connected to a virtual machine. I'm using the Hyper-V Manager, and I'm connected into a VM. And in this VM, it's called SAV01. I have these services installed. And if I hit F5 and refresh, as you can see, there's no dynamic server installed there. Well, I've already downloaded the package onto this system, and all I need to do is do an add appv package for that service, and it will add that package to the environment. If it's not downloaded, you'll have to download it before you can do that. When I do that, and I hit F5 on the services here, you can see now Dynamics is there. But it's not running. And the reason it's not running is I need to configure it. I need to tell it which database server to hit and all the configuration information. So now I can set appv package for that service with the XML configuration file that I have for it. And at this point, it'll say, okay, this package needs to hit this SQL server with these credentials. And it's going to run through and pass that configuration into the VM itself. Into that appv, that server appv package itself. Again, once this is done, the package still won't be started. So it's finished here, but the package still won't be started because all I've done is pass config information. I haven't started it. So my next step is to bring this down here. You can see that right there, is to start the service. And when I hit start the service, and this is pre-release stuff, so it may or may not work, but what you can see is that the package is starting. And so I've now started up that package, and now I can connect to it and access the server environment. So that's one of the things that Server App V will be packaged and delivered through VMM vNext. VMM vNext will be the release vehicle for Server App V. But we're also going to release PowerShell capabilities, because everything you can do in VML, you can do with PowerShell. App V won't be any different there. So now I'm going to show you real quickly some VMM vNext stuff. Now this is very, 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 very early CTP technical preview type stuff. We're looking to have a beta, second half with the release second half of next year. So we're looking to have a beta. I think I should say this. We're looking to have a beta, the first half of 2011, and we're looking to release within 2011. Those are things that we've already talked about at places like MMS, so I can show you that stuff. This is way before that release, so if some things don't work, I apologize. But let's show you some of the things you can do there. I think I got like 1 minute. Actually, time is up right now. This is really all the stuff I wanted to show. If you want to stay, I think I'm just cutting into your tea time. So if you're okay with staying, I'm okay with talking. If you want to leave, thank you very much for coming to the session today. But what I'm going to do is show you a pre-look at VMM vNext. Kind of shows you this host environment, and it has a cloud environment. So what you're really showing is that you can have these clouds, whether they're private or public, whether they're internal or they're hosted, and we'll be able to hopefully talk to all of that. Now, initially released, we're going to make sure everything happens for the private cloud. If we can add some of that public cloud in by release time, we'll make sure we do it. If we can't, then it'll be something that we'll add on as things come out. One of the things we're going to talk about there, we talked about this service composition. Well, the service composition is made up of a few capabilities. And that is, one, I need to have a base image. So I have these standard images, like a web image, a SQL image, and an app image. And those are my 3 images that I have for managing the environment. Now, for my web environment, if I want to deploy a certain type of web image, I take that standard web image, deploy it, and then throw a web configuration on top of it. If I want a SQL image, I throw the SQL image down, and then I throw the SQL DAC components on top of that. And if I wanted to do an application, I throw the app image down, and then I install one of these app V packages that I've already created and deploy that on top of that environment. And I can create a service. And we give you examples of multiple types of services here. And in this example, I can create a multi-tier system, whether it be just a client server or it's a multiple 3-tier application with a web front end that's load balanced. And so I can create this web server balanced application within my environment, and it's really a drag and drop template. So I go down here and I take this web environment and I drop it onto the website, and I take this database environment, or I'll take the application environment, which is down here, and I'll drop that app template onto the app level. And as we look at what this environment looks like, well, I have these servers, these web NICs that are connected to different servers, and this one's on a load balanced web pool, and that's important because I'll show you why in a second. And then for my database application, I'll just drag and drop it on. But one thing I want to do before I drag and drop it on is I want to make sure that my database server in the production environment is set up for high performance. But if that database environment is going to say dev and I don't really care as much about performance, I can say, okay, put it on my tier 2 SANs. And so I can determine what types of SANs that I have, storage classes, categories, and put the appropriate VM on the appropriate storage device. And let's see. I think I've run into a problem because I'm out of screen resolution. So let me do this. Close window. There we go. That's the problem when you get a CTP from a developer that has a really, really big screen and you have to run on 1280 by 720. You can't fit. So I've done that. Now, one of the things about our service composition that makes it different than, say, a VMware vApp type thing where it has just a list of servers is that we look at the environment and we can allow you to dynamically change the capabilities of that system. So if we look at this web environment right here and we click on it, come on. Oh, I got to drop my DB template over here. Maybe I'm just out. Let me close and restart it. All right, are we back or not? No, we're screwed. Okay. Here we go. Let's try it again. So we go back into here. We hit OK. Scroll this out. Now I'm just going to drag these over. I'm not going to touch them. Okay. Let's close all this. Like I said, pre-CTP. Let's see, is everything closed? Yeah. So now let's go back and relaunch it. See, it's a debug build. All right. So I got to go back to that create service. Let me minimize this right here. Hit create service. We'll go through those same steps and processes that we did before. So come on up. There we go. Open this out. Hit OK. This is one of the things I wanted to show you, so hopefully this works for me this time. So draw the DB over to here, the web service over to here, and the app over to here. Now, if I click back on this web service, in this environment, I have this capability down here where I can say that this machine layer, the web tier layer, can be scaled out. And I can say default is that the minimum instant count, I can say that it never drops below 1. The maximum count, I can say, is it can scale up to 10. So, maybe at those 3 periods of the month for that HR web, I needed to have 10 VMs. But for most of the time, it can satisfy with just 1, the resource requirements. And then I can say default amount, though that number is, let's say, 3. So default, when it deploys this environment, it deploys 3 web servers, 1 app server, and 1 database server, so 5 servers. As more resources are needed and it gets hit really hard, it expands out to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 web servers, 1 app, and 1 database server. And as those resources go away, it drops back down. It can go all the way down to 1 if no one's ever hitting this application. So I can set that environment. Because I have a load-balanced environment here for this web layer, then it will, when it installs this application, it will connect itself to the load balancer, and the load balancer will handle, accessing those systems. So that's one of the nice things that we can create within VMM is these composable environments. And if we look at what that looks like, what it looks like is this. If I click on its services here, we can see I have this web store, which is an example of one that I created, where it has those 3 environments and it has the 2 web store, the app, and the database server. And I can do that for all my different environments. Another thing I can do within this environment, within VMM vNext, is I can manage more than just Hyper-V and VMware hosts. So we've talked about it, that we're eventually going to support Zen Server. Well, now we actually we will support Zen Server, Citrix environments within VMM vNext. Then the last thing that we do, and this one always fails on this, I'm running on this system, so we keep our fingers crossed, but I don't think it's going to work. But within the library, I can take these base images, and I can do this thing called compliance checks. So I can look and see whether or not these applications are compliant against specific baselines and rules that I've created. And if they become out of compliance, I can have them remediate. So an example, a patch comes out, I add that to my compliance request here, I do a scan, any of the systems that don't have that patch applied, it will automatically apply to that patch. It will tell me these are out of compliance, I can fix those, and I can do it in the library, and then after I do it in the library, I can run it on the host. Now once I hit OK here, it's going to crash the VMs, the application. So instead of doing that, I'm just going to hit cancel and see if that crashes the VM. Okay. Oh. By hitting that, it's now scanning for update. So it's going to scan these systems. This is the part that I kept trying to get to work, and I think when it hits the end, it's going to crash. So we'll see. Fingers crossed, everyone. Yep, told you. All right, so at that point, it would have worked. It would have said that the app image was out of compliance, but the other 2 were okay. And the nice thing is, and I'll see if I can get back to there before our time's up. Once that happens, I can go into my other hosts and update them too as well. So I can go to my services, and after I've done that patch on all the base images, it will tell me which of these services have that base image that needs to be applied and updated. And at that point, then I can just right-click on. I can click on the VM here, and then I can go down to this part right here, which I can't get down to because my screen's not big enough, that says remediate. And it will actually go in, take that application, pop it up, drop the new VM in, and then put it back down. And that's one of the nice things about having this split between the application and the OS is that I can deploy an update of that OS, give it all the same information as this OS, but with the updated bits, the updated patches and everything, and then simply move the VM over. I can have both of them up and running and then move the VM over and then switch the networking, so now this guy's up and running on the networking. So I can have less intrusive and less less amount of time that I have down for this application, because before I'd have to update the application, go through a full reboot before I brought that up, update the OS, go through a full reboot before that image is back up and updated with the new OS. Now I have both of them deployed. I just simply stop the application, move it, and start it. And it's as quick as that. And I would basically copy a new application over there and then stop it, copy all the stuff that I need to copy, and then start it. So, it's really a much faster way of updating your servers and environments that way. So with that, that's a preview. If you're on the CTP, you might be able to see something a little bit earlier, but we're looking at beta, first quarter next year, and release next year sometime. So with that, I appreciate your time today. Hopefully you've been able to pick up some tips on Pro, as well as see some of the future of VMM. Thank you very much. Let me grab them, because I don't want to take them home. They're just Hyper-V teddy bears that